Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We are super excited to be here today. This is our first major kickoff with our schools that have opted in to pilot the ILEARN Checkpoints for the 24-25 school year. I'm Lynn Schimmel. I'm the Chief Academic Officer and Director of Student Assessment. With me today, I have Mary Kravoka, our Assistant Director of Assessment, and Logan Miller, who is our ILEARN Specialist. So the three of us will be providing you with some details today and just some basic information to get us started. Again, this is the first in our series, and we're so excited that you're here. And who's here today? We are really thankful and appreciate the opportunity that over 72% of eligible schools are participating in this opt-in pilot, and we're still growing. We've had some outreach the last couple of weeks that we still have schools that want to participate. So we're really excited. And, the next screen will have more information regarding what a pilot is, but we're all embarking on a large scale pilot research project. There will be, with a large amount of state participating, there's going to be ample data for research studies, for comparative data, for statewide data, and a wide variety of feedback to make the operational year in the 25-26 school year the best that it can be as we continue with innovations in this new assessment system that we're developing. So as I mentioned on the last slide, the pilot is a large-scale research project. As many of you noted prior to signing up, and while checkpoints are not a part of the accountability system, the pilot does give an opportunity to engage with the system prior to the operational year. As we've built this system, we've designed it with users in mind. We've sought a lot of input prior to getting here, but we still have some time to improve various components of the system. Some of these areas will be discussed during focus groups, and others will be included on surveys throughout the pilot. Being part of the pilot allows you to work through your scope and sequence, review resources, consider instructional support needed prior to the operational year. The ILEARN Checkpoint pilot is not. I really want to emphasize this, and we've had some questions about this as we've had various Q&As. The pilot is not a chance to change the test design. When we were looking at the design of this system, we reached out and had an 80% survey return rate to help us build the test blueprints. We had educators come in, draft some additional blueprint information. We sent that out for public comment again through corporations and non-public schools and charter schools. We received that feedback. We sent out the blueprints again and got feedback. And so we've had a lot of input leading into this. We've had focus group reviews, and through those opportunities and meetings with the stakeholders at various conferences and various principal and superintendent meetings, we received a lot of feedback on the through-year model, in addition to working with test vendors, thought partners, and other states. It's not a chance to review specific items. That's really done through committees, and a lot of your educators in your school systems help us with that. So there are other opportunities for that. This isn't a time intended to be this isn't a system, rather, to be an evaluation tool for teachers. It's really for instructional purposes. And we know that some of you are still working through your evaluation model and how you might be able to use checkpoints or how they can be used in goal setting. And we're happy to be a part of that conversation if needed. Again, when you opted in or someone from your school completed the opt-in job forms, you agreed to do the following. You agreed to participate in the full pilot year. So our first checkpoint begins September 16th, runs for 9 weeks, and we have the following one through 11 weeks, and then the following one through another 9 weeks. So you're agreeing to opt into all three of those checkpoints. One, to provide that instructional data for your teachers, and then for your students to know where they're at, but then also to provide us with various feedback on the system. You're agreeing to participate in focus groups and surveys as assigned. Some of you will be in focus groups, not everyone, but everyone will be surveyed at various points throughout the process. We do need to know who is going to be in the program, in this project. So we did need to set a cutoff date. So our cutoff date is Wednesday, July 31st. We need to know if you wish to no longer be part of the project, or if you open a new school, or if a neighboring district wants to participate. They're welcome to join us. And then our cutoff date will be July 31, so we can make sure that we have all the systems in place and that everybody is trained and ready. We do have some norms as we think about working together. Again, we hope that you've joined us, again, for these opportunities to get data, opportunities to, help us improve and innovate, and to get the data, for your educators and students. We hope that you come to the meetings positive, being problem solvers, engaging with others, listening and sharing. We want to focus on what we can change. I mentioned some things earlier that, the blueprints are set. There's a lot of, input that's already gone into those, a lot of psychometric work behind the scenes, and it's just not easy just to adjust one thing or multiple things and then have a test ready in time. We also know that there was a lot of legislation that recently occurred around our work. And so some of those things are already set, and we can't go back and change them. We just need to know how to move forward. And so we hope that you'll come to our projects ready to be partners in the work. Just a reminder, this is what the system looks like. There are the 3 checkpoints. You've opted in for math and or ELA. Again, that first checkpoint will open up September 16th. Reminder that each checkpoint has around 4 to 6 or 7 standards in them, depending on the grade level and the content area. There are 2 or 3 subdomains that are being assessed. Each subdomain contains various standards. They're mostly focused on the essential standards. There are some priority standards that weren't essential, but that educators and the feedback that we received that they were important to assess. Most of the checkpoints, we've given you information. There are some of the ELA checkpoints do not have that second chance opportunity, and we'll be reminding you of that. But for all math and for half of the ELA, we do have the second opportunities through both the first and the second checkpoints. And then again, it's that third checkpoint where we don't have a retest for all of the ELA, but those opportunities are open until the summative begins. So that Friday before the Monday of the summative, those second chance opportunities are there for students. And then our summative, again, you're going to get information on the reporting categories as well as those subdomains. And then just a reminder that all students will be assessed on the essential standards. And then there will be a sampling of students across the state who receive those non-essential standards. And then just a reminder that the summative remains the only component for accountability purposes. The checkpoints, not only through this pilot year, but also when we go operational, those are intended to be used for instructional purposes only. So thank you. Logan.
Thank you, Len. So next, I wanted to go over what the second opportunity is, what its purpose is, and then what is it not intended for. So this was previously mentioned, but the second opportunity, the overall purpose is to have that second opportunity given to students who they may have a learning gap on a standard or a skill. It is not meant to be given to all students. One of our goals was to reduce testing overall, and so it is a local decision on who you think would benefit from getting that second opportunity for each checkpoint. It is not meant to be given to all students for each checkpoint. And then I wanted to give a overall reminder of what our checkpoint system is, and then what is it not as well. So reminder that the checkpoints are meant to be given after the student has had the opportunity to learn the content. It is not meant to be given before they have a chance to learn the content. And so I'm thinking back to when I gave a different formative assessment, and I gave an assessment that in August we had all the standards on there, and on that assessment in September or August, when when the students took it, their scores weren't great because every single standard was on that assessment at the start of the year. And I didn't know exactly, what standards are they, is there a learning gap, or have they just not been taught the content yet? And so the checkpoints, what is so great about them is that once you get that feedback and that data back, you can see clearly, is there a learning gap for this student? Because they have had the chance to be given that content. And then, so that kind of leads me into that next point where the second opportunity is not intended to be a pre-test and post-test with the first opportunity. So checkpoint 1 should be given after the opportunity to learn, and it's not meant to be given as a pre-test, post-test with the second opportunity. A different question that we have got a lot is, what does it look like for students who move in during the middle of the of the year, or like even in the spring? What does that look like for those students? So it is a local decision as well on what makes sense for those students. So for if a student moves in like in December, and that's after the first checkpoint has already finished, you could, after that student has had the chance to learn that content and those standards, you could give the second opportunity to that student as their checkpoint 1, because the second opportunity, as I think it was mentioned, that window is open from when the checkpoint begins through the spring summative assessment. So checkpoint 1, the second opportunity is open until April. And so if a student moves in December, you still have some time to ensure that student has been given that second opportunity as their checkpoint 1. Since we have so many students and teachers and schools that are in the pilot, if a student moves to your district from a different school that has been doing the pilot, their data will transfer over with them. And then, like I said, if they are moving to you without that data, that second opportunity can be used if it makes sense. So if they move in like March, it may not make sense to try to cram in some assessments. Do what makes the most sense for your students and for your school. And then we can take this year, this pilot year, and see, what do interventions look like and what has been working well to bridge those learning gaps? What resources on our end can we provide to help that? And then what can schools do to better support those students with a specific standard or skill where they see a learning gap? So that is what we can use the pilot year for the second opportunity as well. And then this slide has been shown in the past, but I want to focus on that middle box, the 2024-2025 school year, as this will be the pilot year. So for next school year, the math and ELA checkpoints will be assessed on the 2023 standards. The math, ELA, and social studies summatives in the spring of 2025 will be assessed on the 2023 standards to the extent possible. After this year's summative assessment is done, we will be publishing some guidance on what that test will look like for those content standard or for those content tests. The ILEARN Science, like this year, for next year, will still be assessed on the 2023 standards. That has already been updated for this year. And then in 25-26, the checkpoints will stay on the 2023 standards. And then science and social studies summatives will reflect the 2023 standards, as well as will math and ELA. And then in 25-26, we have mentioned in a previous Q&A that there will be the shortened summative that is not for 24-25. 25-26 is when that shortened summative will come into play. And as a reminder, what that will look like is the ELA performance task that currently has 2 parts will only have 1 part in 25-26. And then the math performance task will be taken away, and those types of questions will be built in within the CAT. So 25-26, shortened summative, and then 24-25 will be a very similar type of summative that you see this year, although the standards will be changed. So Lynn mentioned different ways that we can get feedback from you all this year during the pilot year is through focus groups and surveys. And we want to use these to help drive improvements if needed, as well as hear you and receive your feedback and to have conversations with you. A pilot year is meant to hopefully everything goes perfectly, but we understand that things will happen. It is a chance to fix those things and or improve things prior to the operational year in 25-26. So I have gotten some questions about focus groups and when they will hear back about that. We will be sending that out by the end of May, if not earlier, of which schools will be in which focus group. And we will send out some dates, most likely, of which dates work best for you to have our first meeting, and they will meet virtually. Some focus groups may have meetings throughout the year next year. Some may only have one or two. It just kind of depends on the focus group of the content of the focus group. And then for surveys, so even if you're not in a focus group, the survey data that we get will help drive future improvements or help change things if we find a minor thing to tweak. And we want to send out a survey to CTCs and then also TAs because we realize that they see different things during testing. And so having a different survey for each will be helpful for us to see both perspectives. And that will be sent out after each checkpoint in the year 24-25. So what ways can you expect us to communicate with you? And then what resources do we have right now? I know that Mary's going to go over some of those resources in detail later. I will outline a little bit right now as well. So many of you have been getting the ILEARN Checkpoints pilot listserv that is sent out on Mondays or as needed. The way or the contact list I have for that is when you signed up for the pilot, a point of contact was given as well as the CTC. Sometimes the CTC was both the point of contact and the CTC. So if you are on this call or if you have somebody at your school who is not on that group and you want them to be added, I can add them to that list for the Checkpoints pilot listserv. And then I will update that weekly. And just got word that I'm not seeing camera or mic. I hope that you guys can hear me. Please step in if you can't.
We're fine with you, Logan.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. I thought that was for me. Anyway, the next resource that will be huge for us next year for all pilot participants is the assessment hub, which is in the on the Learning Lab, and that has been created already. There are some resources on there right now, and then more will be added throughout the pilot year. This will be a great spot as a one-stop shop for all pilot resources because we realize that this is very different from our other assessments, and we understood that it would be difficult for pilot participants to go to many different places to find the resources they are wanting. And so having everything they need in one spot, we hope will give you a great a great resource to lean on during the pilot year. If you have questions or if you want to find a specific resource, it will be on the assessment hub. And those will be added throughout the year as well. And so continue to come back to that because we will add them as they come in. And then just like for current assessment help, our team and then the assessment help desk are both going to be still available to help and to answer questions during the year. And so if you have testing issues or like anything like that, the same people who you contact now will still be for the pilot. And then we also plan on having some standing office hours scheduled throughout the year to where it's like an open house style where like you can come in and ask questions. And if you have questions that would be better to be answered in person or virtually, we can be there to answer those questions for you. And some of the things that are going to be on the Assessment Hub, we do have some workshops planned, and this is just an outline of a few of those and some tentative dates on when they may be released on the Assessment Hub. And so on that list there, you can see a few different workshops that we will be sending out in those months. Depending on the content, the workshop may be a live event on StreamYard or like on like WebEx or something like that. Some though may be just a recording and just on demand for you based on the content. And so if it's more like interactive, it may be live. If it's more of just a training or a way for you to learn something new about the pilot, it may be a recording. And then if you have questions based on those workshops, so if you watch one of those and you're not really sure about something on it or you want some more information, a great resource would be to reach out to us, or also those scheduled office hours that I mentioned. That would be a great time to come to those and then ask questions about the workshops as well. And then what type of documents are we going to be sending out for the pilot? Will it be similar to the current ILEARN documents? And then just an overview of the year as well. So this is what we know right now. As we get some more information come in and as we have more things to send out, that will be communicated to you all. So we currently have all of the ILEARN Checkpoints milestones document. That will be up and running by Saturday, June 1st. I just saw a question that many of you are not getting the checkpoint listservs. I believe that would probably be because the list that I have would only have the point of contacts and the CTCs. After this presentation is over, if you want to send me an email, I will put my email in the chat later on. If you want to send me an email with that request, I can get your email added, or on the question form in the chat on the screen, if you want to fill that out with that request and have your email listed, then I can get you added to that as well. So I apologize if you're not been getting them. I have just been going off of who signed up for the checkpoint pilot. So that is the milestones document that will be there. It'll be very similar to the ILEARN milestones document that you are used to. The assessment windows for next year are already posted on our webpage. Those show the checkpoint windows. And then we will have an ILEARN Checkpoints manual. We are still figuring out the best name for it, as it will be similar to the ILEARN TAM, but it will be much shorter and just for the checkpoints. And so it won't be a full encompassing manual like the ILEARN TAM is. It will just have the necessary information about the checkpoints. And so that will be there for you as well. Testing scripts and practice tests. So there will be separate testing scripts on the portal to be used to administer the checkpoints by Monday, September 2nd, which is 2 weeks prior to the first checkpoint window opening. So it is a separate script. It is not the same script that you will use to administer the ILEARN summative assessment in the spring of 2025. Practice tests, they will be made available on Monday, August 26th. Only ELA, and this is kind of different for next year because we are now giving some assessments in the fall, which is new. So practice tests, only ELA and math will need to be administered prior to checkpoint 1, since the checkpoints only assess math and ELA. So if you have a grade 4 practice test and there's some information about science on there because grade 4 takes science, you wouldn't need to go over that part of the script. Students would only take the math and ELA practice tests prior to checkpoint 1. And then in the spring of 25, if they've already taken that practice test once, they are not required to take the ELA and the math practice test again prior to the summative. However, you can take it if students need a refresher. So that's kind of up to you. If you feel that after taking the 3 checkpoints, students are good with the tools for ELA and math, you may or may not give that practice test in the spring of 25, but you can if you feel it, that it would be good for your students and your school. And then virtual schools. We will have some additional manuals, resources, and required trainings to prepare you for the remote proctoring. And then I just wanted to mention that only virtual schools will have access to this software, and then only during the checkpoint assessment windows. In 24-25, it will not be the summative windows. The virtual school, we will have a separate focus group for you as well that we can go over some additional things with you and get feedback from that. And so be on the lookout if you are a virtual school, as you will most likely be involved in a focus group. And with that, I'm going to pass this off to Mary.
Great. Thank you so much, Logan. And hello, everyone. Great to see you here today. I'm Mary Kravolka, and I'm going to share a little bit more with you about the resources that are already available to you to start preparing for the new system. And I've seen lots of questions coming in on our bit.ly link, so thank you for that. And I want to just make mention, we're just going to look at a couple of these resources, and then we're going to focus on your questions for the last 20 minutes of our discussion, so keep those coming in. As you prepare for your checkpoints, there are a couple of things I want to show you and point out. Our test blueprints have been ready to go. They've been published for a while. Lots of really important and key information on the test blueprints. And the place you can find those, I'm actually going to give you a live demo here, is Indiana's Learning Lab has a new assessment hub. And as Logan mentioned earlier, what we're trying to do is put everything in for you so that you can go there and get the resources that you need. So when you go into the Learning Lab, you can log in with either Google or with your DOE identity. And the Assessment Hub, brand new, you'll see a lot of coming soon. We're excited because we're going to be adding lots of things to this hub in the next couple of months in particular. And I hope that you're as excited as I am. But if you jump into our pilot info section, it's going to take this moment to go a little bit slow for me. But I want to direct you to our checkpoints system collection. And within this checkpoint system collection, we have a couple of resources already. We'll have a few to add, but these two are live links to our through-year blueprints. I'm going to jump over to the mathematics one right now. And the reason I emphasize that they are live links is because we are adding resources and information to these resources over the course of the summer in particular, but even as we have some new here on my screen, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. What you see here is our grade 3 mathematics ILEARN test blueprint. And if you haven't gone to this, I really urge you to take a look and become familiar with this test blueprint because it's going to give you a lot of information. Our goal is to be very transparent and to help all of the teachers, all of the educators, and everyone that's involved to understand exactly what it is we're measuring, when we're measuring it, and how they can be successful. We don't want it to be this this vague, well, you just have to reach at proficiency, but we want you to understand what proficiency looks like. And the first step in understanding that is understanding our test blueprints. So in this case, we have all of our academic standards listed for math, and the level of priority exactly matches that level that was approved by the State Board of Education on the academic standards documents. So you'll see that right here, the essential or the standard, regular standards, as well as how these standards are grouped for our subdomain reporting, which is more granular than what we've had in the past. And then I'm going to scroll over to the right. Also, our larger reporting category reports. So you can see those groupings throughout. And then you will also see which of the standards are going to be measured at checkpoint 1, 2, 3, and summative. And this will really support you as you plan to schedule your checkpoints, because like Logan was talking about, opportunity to learn is very important in this system. So you'll want to think about, when do I schedule checkpoint 1? It's available September through November. When do I schedule this so that students have actually had the opportunity to learn the 5 standards that are assessed on this checkpoint? And then these standards that were chosen and selected by our surveys and our educator committees as those foundational early on standards that students learn in grade 3 mathematics. But then, if I may, I want to point out something that we've only just begun to make available for grade 3 math, but you'll be seeing these roll out as soon as they're developed. We're linking our item specifications directly to the test blueprint, so you don't have to go to another place. This should feel really similar to the way that our standard frameworks, our instructional frameworks, are set up for teachers. So I'm actually going to go to this 3CA1 item specification as an example. And I'm so excited to share this with you because I think it's a huge step forward in transparency and just in the level of specificity that we're able to share with you. They're very different from our previous item specifications. And what you'll see on them is the academic standard. If the standard is essential, it shows up in that gray shading that we're used to, and tells us what reporting category and subdomain this standard feeds into, and also gives your teachers a direct link to the instructional framework. You'll notice that our instructional framework links directly to our assessment resources and our assessment directly to the instructional, because really those things go hand in hand, right? Our instruction and our teaching, our learning strategies, and our assessment should all be hand in glove, aligned for the best student outcomes. And that is certainly our goal with this system. So you can click on that and go straight to the instructional frameworks, and you'll notice that there are lots of overlaps on the information within our item specs and our frameworks, just from a different lens. So we're looking for that cohesive system. Within these specifications that you can see are very Indiana specific and written for Indiana academic standards, we have some content limits, and this helps us to understand. In this example, this is kind of an easy example to get our minds around. This standard is talking about adding and subtracting multi-digit whole numbers. And we're thinking about place value, properties of operations, and the relationship between addition and subtraction. So we have some limits here of, we're not going to ask students to go beyond 1 million. We're not going to use terms like borrow or carry, because those are kind of curriculum specific. And so just ways that we make sure these items are accessible for all students. The ways that we represent a variable. So these are clarifications, because not only are you all going to use them to help support classroom instruction, but also these are the documents that our item writers use to ensure that all of our items meet our specifications. There'll also be different clarifications, and these clarifications look very different across the resources because it's very based and very specific to the content within that standard. But anything that we want to clarify for how we're assessing this content will be listed here. We talk about some different accessibility features, different for math and ELA. For math, we think about calculator, and ELA, we think about some text-to-speech differences for different standards. So those are listed. Also, our expected academic vocabulary that students would need to know in order to be successful. And then some model tasks. So these model tasks I'm going to kind of come back to. I want to skip them for now and show you some examples of context at varying difficulty levels. So we know that we have a computer adaptive assessment. And this item specification will explain to you how we make different items easier or harder for students. And this is helpful as well for a classroom because sometimes it's hard to think about, well, what are the different ways that we give context to students that makes things easier or harder for them to navigate? And so this could be really helpful as teachers think about how they might make a task for their students or just some classroom assessments. And then finally, I think the most helpful part of these new item specifications is rather than thinking about proficiency for students at a big overall overarching level of proficiency on all of our academic standards, we want to bring this down to the standard level because that's how we teach. We teach things step by step. So we want to think about proficiency more at the standard level as we're moving through instruction. So what we have done is we have taken each standard and provided a proficiency level descriptor, that narrative that says, here's how students are going to show these different levels on the assessment and given an example item for that proficiency. And these are very directly linked to natural learning progressions. So if we think about adding and subtracting, here's a good example. Students would be below proficiency if they can add or subtract whole numbers only when regrouping is not required. So this example shows, you know what, I can add and subtract, but I haven't gotten to where I understand that place value. That helps me to add or subtract with regrouping. So that's kind of where they start. That's how they start learning, but that's not where they stop on this standard. When they're approaching proficiency, they're going to be able to add or subtract one set of multi-digit whole numbers when regrouping is required. So here they're getting close. They've almost hit proficiency if they can do it one time with regrouping. To demonstrate that they have met the standard, they have to be able to add and subtract multiple sets of whole numbers fluently. So you can see here's an example of where they would do multiple sets. And then an additional example here below, they might be able to select 3 equations, all of which equal 675 to show that fluency. And then finally, what does it look like to be above proficiency? For this standard, the students can apply principles of addition and subtraction to complete different equations like you see as the examples on the screen. So this can help us also break down our teaching to think about here's where students really start, and then what can we do to push them to the next level. So I saw some questions come in on the Bitly. I'm going to switch back over about when these item specifications are coming out. Really as quickly as possible. We're linking them as soon as they're done. Our goal is July 1 for all grades and content areas to have these completed. The quicker that we can get them finished, because there's lots of steps, research-based of looking at actual student performance on our different items and creating these. We will add them as soon as they are ready. And what we plan to do is publish in our listserv, our checkpoints listserv, each time that an entire grade is complete. That way you don't have to come back and check. But if you are using it, you'll have everything that we have. All right. And I'm going to skip through because I talked through these slides, but you'll have some notes on our slides when we send these out on Monday in our upcoming Checkpoints listserv, along with this recording. So I want to switch over. I think the rest of the team is going to join me on stage now, and we're going to take a look at the questions that you have submitted. And we have lots of time to go through these, so I'm going to take just one moment and get to the beginning of my list.
Yeah, and I can start, Mary. And I apologize if this was already answered, as I'm just going to go through our list. And to answer the overall checkpoint listserv question, my email will be shared with all of you. If you would like to be added to that, you can send me an email with that request. One question that I see is for the practice tests on the checkpoints, will we do that just for once, or will we need to repeat it for each round or each checkpoint? And so like I mentioned, once you do the math and ELA practice test before checkpoint 1, you are free to do it again for each checkpoint and the summative, but you don't need to. It's just up to you and the school on what makes the most sense. We have a question about if the checkpoints will replace the ILEARN summative and if that will happen in the future. And so that is not in our plans. The ILEARN checkpoints currently are just meant for instructional purposes for teachers and students. And the ILEARN summative in the spring will remain as the only accountability piece.
And one thing, if I can jump in on that, that's a really deep question. Also, because when you think about this, the concept of accountability, what you always want is you want a picture of a student across the year. But one of those unintended impacts that happens is when students, or when you change an assessment to make it related to accountability or go into an accountability model, all of a sudden that assessment becomes high stakes. And whether we mean for it to or not, it really usually negatively impacts the instructional use of that assessment. So right now, as Logan said, we really want these checkpoints to support teaching and learning. We don't want them to be used in any way, in any form, as a stick to beat somebody with. That's not what we want accountability to be anyways, but that's what it feels like sometimes. And so there are different ways that in the future that the accountability team could consider. And I know that there have been discussions about that, but for the foreseeable future, what we're planning to do is say we have our checkpoints discrete, then we have our summative discrete scoring that goes into accountability. But also the third thing that I want to make sure is clear is we also have these across the year reports that will come out with the summative, and they will show student achievement over the course of the year on those very granular topics that are called subdomains, like analyzing literature, using vocabulary, understanding fractions, those kinds of things. There's also one, before I give it back to you, Logan. I saw that there's a question about checkpoint data being able to be used for funding opportunities. Another fantastic question. And yes, our understanding and goal is that the data we provide should allow you to submit for all of these various funding opportunities. But if you have something specific that you're working with, I would encourage you to email us, because we're also happy to be an advocate for you and your school to help explain what our checkpoint data is to various stakeholders. And especially as our system becomes peer reviewed by the federal peer review, which kind of gives us a nice national endorsement on our system, that helps with that as well. So if you have something specific, we're definitely happy to work with you, because we agree with you that we don't want to overtest our students. And our goal would be that these checkpoint systems could do what you need to do for any of those funding opportunities.
Thank you, Mary. We have a question about some test security trainings and if those would be pushed up because of the checkpoints being in September and the practice tests being before September. And the answer is yes, we will have those required trainings for TAs to have that TA certification done before that first checkpoint and before the practice test can be administered. We will make sure to communicate out. I believe we have that on a separate slideshow of the specific date, but I can't recall off the top of my head of when that would be available. But I can definitely find that, and we can put that information into a future listserv, and/or we will send that out when it comes closer to time of that moment before the beginning of the school year. We had a question about schools that are not virtual schools, but asking if they can use the remote proctoring for their students who maybe are off campus or homebound. And so currently right now, our expectation is with the checkpoints that only schools that have students who are full-time enrolled in a virtual school, so those virtual schools who only provide those services, will have access to the remote proctoring to administer the checkpoints remotely. This is a pilot year. We want to see how that goes. We're not going to say anything for the future past that, but our expectation is right now that only students who are enrolled full-time in a virtual school will have access to the remote proctoring resource. I see a question of how do we schedule checkpoint tests, and what do we suggest, if they should be on the same day or within the same week, or is it okay for them to test their students just sometime within that checkpoint timeframe? And that's a great question. Because the checkpoints are meant to be given after students have had a chance to learn the content, we understand that not all students learn at the same rate, and not all teachers teach at the same rate. And some classrooms may be ready for checkpoint 1 at the beginning of the window, which is 9 weeks after the start of the school year. Sorry, about 6 weeks after the start of the school year, depending on when you start. Some students may be ready. And if a class is ready to take the checkpoint 1 in September, then that is fine. If a different classroom in the same grade level, in the same school, is not ready to take the first checkpoint until mid to late October, that's fine. Whatever works best for you and your students, you can test at any point during the checkpoint windows, and each window is about 9 weeks long. Checkpoint 2 window is about 10 weeks long due to Christmas break. And that does not need to be reported to us. You can just test them when it best works for you and your school.
A couple of questions about the item specifications, which may have been answered, but I just want to make sure we highlight that. So those item specifications are linked in the test blueprints that are on the Learning Lab. And what we'll do, just to make sure everybody's super clear about that, is this coming Monday's listserv, we'll be sure to highlight that in our listserv with that link to the test blueprints. It's going to be a one-stop shop. So if you've got the blueprint, you've got the item specs as well, because they're linked directly in there. And then a few folks are asking about the running calendar. We'll take that back and see, because there's such a large number of schools, 72% that are part of the pilot, we may add that. We hadn't originally, due to not wanting to cause confusion for schools that were not part of the pilot, but we'll take that back and consider that if that's really helpful for you all. And I think Avon has specifically a question about high ability identification, which is a common question and a good question. We have confirmed with the high ability team that the checkpoints beginning this pilot year can be used for the achievement portion of high ability identification, which is what NWEA has done for many schools. So we'll have a state and local school comparison available on the pilot. It won't be a percentile ranking, but there will be some descriptive language for you that will help you to identify students that may be eligible, like for the COGAT or the next phase of your high ability identification. And so you will be able to use the checkpoints for that beginning the pilot year. The first operational year will also have percentile rankings, and we're planning to also add in national norming on the summative as well.
I see a couple of questions about who can administer the checkpoints and if those policies change. And so because this is still a secure test and a secure testing environment, even though it's not the accountability piece, the same policies that we use for the ILEARN summative of who can administer the test, who can be a TA, who can be a proctor, those policies will remain in place to just keep things consistent throughout the year, and not to cause confusion of the differences. So those will be the same. And then we also had a question about taking down resources in the room, and we just want to be cautious about, think back to like when you give an assessment, like let's say that you give an assessment on math over fractions, and as a teacher, I would want to take down certain reference sheets or formulas or vocabulary that would assist the student during the test if it was a classroom test. And so we want to be mindful of, if we're giving the math checkpoint, we don't want to have any resources up in the room that could assist the student on the math checkpoint. Same thing for ELA. And so it doesn't have to be, it just needs to be what makes sense, as we don't want to give students an unfair advantage in one classroom, whereas in a different classroom, they don't have those resources up on the wall.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that a little bit, we want this data to be instructionally useful. And so as teachers, we would say, oh, we want to make sure if students can or cannot do these things without the supports, that they won't have at the end of the year either. And someone else asked about monitoring. What does it look like for CTCs to monitor during the checkpoints? And it's, while these checkpoint tests are considered secure in the sense that we don't want our items to be posted or copied or used, because items are very, very expensive and time consuming to create, and we need our items right now for our system to be successful. But there is a different level of stakes. Obviously, these are much lower stakes than our accountability tests at the end of the year. And so what this would look like for the CTC is, just checking in like you usually would if you were maybe administering NWEA, checking in on your teachers, making sure that they're administering, popping by to make sure that everything looks good in their classroom, just kind of keeping an eye, being available for when they need support.
We had another question about like if individual classes can test at different times. Yes, for example, their honor and high ability classes might be able to move quicker through the standards. And can they test before other classes? Yes, when they are ready, they can take the checkpoint if they move through the content quicker at a quicker pace. I see a question about, a great question about linking the checkpoints to a vendor system such as iReady. We are in communications with some vendors who have those personalized student pathways. One example is iReady. One example is Edmentum has reached out. I know that IXL Skill Plan has reached out. And I know that I'm forgetting one. We have, I think, 4 or 5 right now that are wanting to partner with us. And Mary, I will let you touch on that. I know that we are still in the process of working with them and figuring out how we can best take our testing system and feed that data into their system. and when that would start, and the amount of people that could pilot that in 24-25, as this is a pilot and something brand new like this, it might be a small group of schools who want to partner with us. We don't have all of those logistics panned out yet, but I'll let Mary touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. We've begun the process of preparing for connection. I don't know, that just felt a little bit like engineering. Like when I said that, I got excited. But we are preparing for connections, and we will not have this available wide scale for the pilot because we want to make sure it's right. We want to make sure that the data are leading students to the correct and well-adjusted learning pathways. And so we will be doing a lot of behind-the-scenes work through early fall, at which time we will have just a couple of districts that will help us to pilot, very, very small number of districts that we will work with to pilot a few things throughout the school year to make sure our connections are in place. And then we should have a scalable system ready for everyone when the first operational year comes. There was a really great question about the test blueprints and the selected academic standards and whether or not they spiral. The really cool thing about our test blueprints in many grade levels, and I could talk a long time about this, but I'm going to try to keep these comments to like 1 minute, is that they're based off of natural learning progressions that occur over the course of time and build upon one another. So spiraling as far as going back and hitting the same standard, no, our test blueprints do not do that. But spiraling as far as going back to concepts that continue to build across the year, yes, they do. So for example, in math, grade 4 or grade 5, actually, you're going to see things about you understanding fractions, using fractions, computing with fractions, modeling fractions that build across the year. So students are going to be working with fractions across the year. They're going to be expanding on that and doing fractions in different ways. So as you expand, you're also reviewing the basics that you already learned at the beginning of the year. The same thing that ELA looks a little bit different, but the neat thing about ELA is there are a lot of literacy skills and literacy acquisition that happens in similar ways for your different genres, like your nonfiction and your fiction. And we have our first 2 checkpoints split up by genre, but a lot of those skills carry through across those different genres. So that's kind of how you'll see the concept of spiraling throughout the blueprints.
And we had a question a while back about the test security and when that TA certification will be made available as everything gets pushed up. And so I did confirm that our milestones document that will be sent out will communicate that the course will be made available on Monday, August 12th. And so from there, that would be about 4 to 5 weeks in advance of the first checkpoint window opening. And I know that isn't a large timeline to complete that course for all the teachers in your corporation. However, I do want to remind that the first checkpoint window is open for 9 weeks. And so if one teacher is ready on the first day of the checkpoint 1 window and they have their course done, they can start. If somebody else has not finished their course yet, they would just need to finish it prior to administering the checkpoints. And so there's plenty of flexibility and time of getting those TAs all certified prior to administering the first checkpoint.
And we are coming to the top of the hour. We have more questions. I wish we could stay on for another little while and just chat more. This is our kickoff welcome meeting. We're going to have lots more Q&As. We also have recording of the questions that we were not able to get to, and I'm so sorry for that, but we will follow up with those questions. We'll have lots more opportunities for us to chat and discuss. And let me just end by saying once again, thank you so much for your collaboration, your partnership, your participation. We want this to be the system that works for you. And so we love to hear from you, and we love to hear your concerns. We love to hear what you think is working. And we just look forward to working with you through the rest of this year and then starting with our pilot next year. So thank you all. Have a wonderful Wednesday, and we'll see you next time.